You're losing control of your audience. Traffic is fragmenting, distribution is shifting, and more of your growth depends on platforms you don't own. Because the way people consume news has changed. The front page isn't a destination, it's a moment. Your stack wasn't built for this. WordPress VIP, Brightspot, homegrown systems, built for pages. Now you're managing workarounds. At some point, optimization becomes limitation. This isn't just inefficiency, it's missed moments, lost audience, and revenue you never recover. ArcXP was built inside the Washington Post newsroom, proven under real pressure at global scale, handling breaking news, massive traffic spikes, and constant change. Create once, distribute everywhere. Generate headline variants instantly. Tag content as you create it. Publish across every channel automatically. AI is built into the workflow. Assist editors in real time. Automate repetitive work. Scale output without slowing teams down. Launch faster, ship faster without patching your stack every time the industry shifts. Own your audience. Turn traffic into relationships and relationships into revenue with built-in identity, personalization, and subscription models. Proven by media companies already using ArcXP. Faster launches, smarter recommendations, real subscription growth. This isn't a CMS upgrade. It's more than just a CMS. ArcXP is the operating system for modern media. Innovate rapidly, own your audience, grow independent revenue.
Welcome to Broadcast's Next Big Bets, reinventing the news business in an age of accountability. Please welcome to the stage Matt Monahan and Darren Alline.
All right, good to be here. Thanks a lot, everybody. And
how you doing, Matt?
Doing very well. I have to admit, I was a little bit nervous for this session because Darren told me before I came out that this is his 30th year coming to NAB. So that's a few more years than I've come to NAB.
But my first time up on this stage.
Yeah, well, this will be a lot of fun. So, look, the premise for today is, obviously, especially over a time period like that, 30 years, broadcast has changed a lot. It's evolving as an industry. Everybody's being pressured to prove their value in real time. And every decision about workflow, technology, and audience is now a test for these organizations. From my perspective, one of the most exciting things, my role is talking to customers about what that really means, but you're in the middle of it. Introduce myself first. My name is Matt Monahan. I lead ArcXP. We power content publishing infrastructure for broadcasters, publishers, all around the world, and we sit right in the middle of these decisions, but at the end of the day, Darren, it's folks like you who are the ones making those decisions. Maybe just a little bit about yourself.
Sure, my name is Darren Alline, and I've been the Director of Engineering at WPLG for 27 years. We've been an ArcXP customer for probably since 2018, I think. We were under a different company, Graham Media Group, but now we're out on our own. And we think Arc helps us, reach our audience, and we like the partnership.
Awesome. Well, also, you're underselling a little bit some of the work that you guys have done independently, because lots of changes that you've overseen in your time there, but one of the biggest came last year.
Yeah, so, for a while, we were separated from Graham, but Graham did some services for us, and one of them was digital. We had a shared services agreement, and Graham did that. And so in 2024, though, they said, look, we want to kind of separate out. And so we started doing our whole dismantling kind of the shared workflow that we had in the world of digital, and a few graphics things and trafficking for TV. And so that was going to be a Herculean task. And so at the end of 2024, we were looking at 2025, and I had a full plate. And went on vacation and came back from vacation at the end of February and found out that we were losing our ABC affiliation.
Yeah, that's right.
So in addition to having to kind of inherit some very complicated workflows and stuff, and do things ourselves and learn things that we had never done. You know, create muscle groups and fitness at creating digital content, web content. We had never done that on our own.
And you could have chosen at that moment to make things simpler, but as I understand it, you didn't exactly do that. If there's a stat maybe for the audience out here, you chose to create 93
hours of news, yeah.
Every week.
Yeah, so when we lost the ABC affiliation, you know, what do you do? And building a programming base that you want to have, and you want to stay relevant to your audience, you know, so you got to get the right programming, you want it to be first run, those kinds of things, and the most expedient thing to do, given the short time frame that we had, was more local news. Do more of what we do well.
Yep.
And so that's what we did. And we brought on roughly 50 employees, and we expanded, you know, storage, cameras, vehicles, all the things we use to do news. We had to grow all that in about 6 months and make sure that we were ready to go on August 4th when we lost the affiliation.
Perfect. Well, it's a good transition. You probably saw the title of this, Broadcast Next Big Bets, but it's really about this age of accountability. And you kind of corrected me when I first introduced this topic to you, but you know, from my perspective, as I look across customers in the broadcast industry, the publishing industry, we're at a bit of an inflection point or a crossroad. There's a few things going on at once, but one of them is most of the leaders in these organizations are being held much more accountable to the financial outcomes of their organizations, to growth, at a time where actually there's a lot of uncertainty about where the audience is going to come from, even the audience that they were used to in the past, and certainly the audience of the future. But when I said this to you, when we were prepping for this, you kind of corrected me and said, well.
Yeah, I don't think it's a new age of accountability. I have been accountable to the companies I work for. I've always worked for organizations that have a strong journalistic ethic, and so nothing changed for us. You know, I mean, we are just being true to ourselves, relevant to our audience, true to our audience. One of the things that a lot of people, I think, forget these days is, you know, we're licensed by the FCC to operate in the public interest. That's the reason, in theory, we have our license.
Yeah.
And so no matter what happens, we have to operate in the public interest.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, nonetheless, operating in the public interest, I pulled a couple of stats together. It's gotten probably harder for us in this space rather than easier. You know, I think last year was the first year that streaming overtook, you know, traditional linear sources of consumption. Right. We see social going up. There's bright spots, obviously. You mentioned to me TV viewership 2024, 2025 is up, and local news continues to be strong. Nonetheless, you know, we are at this kind of inflection point where to serve exactly what you're saying.
Right. So one of the things that happened to us when we lost our ABC affiliation was we had to, they did retransmission deals with the virtual MVPDs, and we lost some of our streaming capability. We were no longer on YouTube TV, Hulu Live. Some of those streamers we were removed from because we were no longer an ABC affiliate, and they don't negotiate with independent stations. So one of the things that I came up with to combat that is to create our own app. And streaming is something that a lot of syndicators, a lot of content providers, you know, they're very careful because they kind of want to own their own streaming market, right? They want to go to direct consumers on their own. They don't want you to do that. But if you geo-fence the feed, you have, a lot of them you have permission to do. So I had to build onto a CTV app that we already had. I had to build the ability to geo-fence that app and put in our linear feed so we could reach our viewers that were going to be disenfranchised by the loss of YouTube TV. By the way, with the help of ARC, you know, we did it, and it was kind of a pivot because originally that wasn't something that was in our plan, but we did it, and we had, I don't know, in a couple of years, we'd probably had about 100,000 downloads of the app. And since August 4th, we've probably had over 80,000 downloads of it. So, and we're delivering about 1.3 petabytes a month to our viewers.
Yeah,
so
it's incredible stats. And
it's getting used.
And by the way, for folks that don't know WPLG, you mentioned spinning off from Graham Media Group, but South Florida.
Yes.
So an interesting audience because you've got multilingual requirements, you've got a diverse audience, younger users.
Younger users, older users. So that's another thing that when we decided to do this streaming, we wanted the bar of entry very low because we have quite a few viewers that are not tech savvy. So, having them get to their phone, scan a QR code, do all that kind of stuff was something I did not want to do. And so we made the bar of entry very low. No paywall, a little different than a lot of other media companies.
Yeah.
But
So
it's worked out.
So putting these ideas together, so you kind of explained a little bit why, from your perspective, you've kind of been accountable to these outcomes the whole time, but you have this pressure test in 2025. What did it mean across your whole org to really make that switch happen?
A lot of work. And to be honest with you, it was even harder because there was an air of uncertainty, right? I mean, WPLG has been around for over 70 years, and it was, an ABC affiliate. Things were going fine. We were always very competitive in our market. So, it was a hard job, but there was certainty about it. And then when you have to move all these services, take on your whole website design and building and all that kind of stuff, and lose the affiliation at the same time, people had to do very hard jobs in an air of uncertainty that they had never had to work under before.
Coming out of the other side of it, what was the hardest part, do you think?
That's a good question. I would say understanding what resources you were going to need. You had to ramp up. How many photographers are you adding? How many cameras are you adding? And the problem was, that stuff kind of comes from the top down, right? So, the news director, news management says, hey, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And so I go out and I get the equipment or design the process, whatever it is. But even they didn't know what they were doing, so things were moving targets as we went through the process. So that made it a little more difficult.
It's a good transition. I mean, when you think about the workflow that you have to put together for something like this, and in your case, putting a lot of it together now from scratch, and the technology is not staying still.
It is not. I think, though, what I would tell you is, so one time, back when I was much younger, I used to do a Dolphins show, Miami Dolphins show, right? And Dan Marino, they had won this remarkable game, and we went and interviewed him right after the game, and he talked about, we said, hey, what kind of special plays do you put in as the game's on the line, and what'd you do? And his answer, and it stuck with me, was, we don't do anything special. What we do at that point is we do the things we do, and we just execute it as well as we can execute it. And so what we tried to do is just grow the things we do and do them well. And this year at NAB, so we did that, and I think it got us, crawl, walk, run. It got us, I'd say, walking. And now is the time we're going to circle back around and look at ways to make it more efficient, possibly, and do things a little differently.
Yeah, okay. That's the last part then I was going to pick on, because that might be true. You had, I think, told our team some stories about the times where you moved facilities in 2009 and then introduced a new system with Abbott in 2017. In this case, you really changed your business quite a bit. And it's happening at the same moment that we're thinking a lot more about different types of automation that we might employ to make these workflows more efficient. Is this really just about efficiency, or are you actually going to completely change the way you do some of this work?
I'm sorry, just about efficiency or?
Is it only about efficiency, or are you actually rethinking some of the workflows, for instance, on the digital production side?
Well, I think first and foremost, it is about efficiency. We want to, we're doing 35 specials a year. That's very taxing for our staff. We want to get ways for them to log shows and do things like that so they can produce that content faster and better. And then after that, by the way, that is new content, and that is different than what we were doing.
Yep.
So we're trying to increase our relevance to our local audience, and we're doing things like, Candy Cane Parade, a spooktacular, where we covered a Halloween event, and those kinds of things. And it sounds a little bit like local cable TV, but it has an audience. We win our time slot with things like that,
cool.
and it's working for us. So we're kind of reinventing ourselves doing that. We're a lot more of things we might have dabbled in a little bit. The other thing we're trying to do and we're looking at is different languages maybe, and try to reach different audiences that way. We have Local 10 in Espanol. Mm-hmm. We're going to try and grow that a little bit. So yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of everything, to be honest.
So there's a couple examples there that I'll pick on. I mean, first is, again, you're running 93 hours of live video each week, all produced independently in-house. And, as a single station, truthfully, in switching from being an affiliate to doing that, were you able to keep many of the same workflows that you had previously in place, or did you have to build some of those differently?
The biggest thing we had to do is improve how we bring content in from the field. And we had been file-based.
Yeah.
We, by the way, are one of the few TV stations in town that still use microwave and microwave trucks. We're committed to somewhat of a microwave infrastructure for live news gathering, although it's getting more and more difficult to be committed to that because the vendors are less and less and,
right.
and more costly and stuff like that. But we just kind of rehabbed our microwave network and stuff. So we are committed to doing live microwave. But, with live use, cellular bonding, we're doing a lot of file-based workflows. And we were sending stuff in via FTP into our building, and that just wasn't cutting it. So we actually teamed with Sony C, and so the guys are putting it in the cloud. One of the things, and I was asking about that, because a lot of these workflows and stuff I put in place, and then I don't hear anything about them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, on the other hand, what does it look like when you don't have a good day, when that system breaks down?
Sony C has gone down. There's lots of gnashing of teeth. Avid has gone down.
Yeah.
We use a Media Composer and I don't know the names. They changed the names so darn much these days on those systems, but we use a Media Composer, and sometimes that goes down. Not very often, but it does go down. And we have a very resilient workforce. We can hot roll from an edit bay, so we have ways to do things as backup. One of the stories that I remember, I think everybody remembers CrowdStrike, right? And what happened? Well, we're a big CrowdStrike house, and at 1:30 in the morning, I get a phone call. It's like everything's got a blue screen, and I'm like, uh-oh. And we actually thought it was a ransomware attack. So we, scramble the fighter jets. We're all going in,
yeah.
And we get there, and everything has a blue screen. But one of the guys is like, look, I think it's this CrowdStrike thing. And so we're talking, we're like, okay, we get it. We're starting to fix it. But, it's going to be hours before we're up. And we hired a lot of new people, very young, and we're approaching the time we're supposed to go on the air. And they're like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, you're going on television. I said, you don't have an option. We're going to stand somebody in front of a camera somewhere, and we're going to punch them up, and they're going to start telling the story. And
I love it.
Yeah, our talent stood on we have a breaking news desk. Our talent stood on the breaking news desk. And I said, if you know, because we use automation, Overdrive, Ross, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Overdrive had a blue screen, all that stuff. Guy went to the switcher, punched it, and off we went. And by the way, it was a great story because they stood there and said, hey, look where we are, this is why. And then we had actually gotten a crew out to the airport.
Yeah.
You know, in flight, it was turmoil.
So the impact there is exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you don't always want to be the news when you're a media company, but
Right.
that's.
I always tell
sometimes
my
it happens.
friends, this: don't ever be on the news.
But so now, you know, it sounds like between all your systems today, there's still some stitching together of workflows between multiple different systems.
It is. Yeah.
More than you'd like? Or do you have kind of best of breed things in place where it's...
We have
still
best of
advanced?
breed things, and I really wish you could unify workflow completely, but I also don't think that ever is going to happen because out over the air is one format. What you're doing, the streaming might be another, VOD content. So I think, you know, at story origin, that might be the same. You know, you're shooting your video, you're bringing it into the building. We edit in the field, it gets brought into the building. Excuse me. Then it gets, you know, edited for air. They tip and tail it and get it ready to go, and then they upload it and stuff. And then after that, it actually gets recorded in the cloud as it plays to air.
Yep.
And then we kind of tip and tail it again there, and then put the right metadata on it and get it in the ARC.
Yeah. I mean, but this is a case where, I mean, this is some of the content that I have in the slide here, speaking to the fact that actually I think some of that is changing now, right? We do have the ability to start to do some automated clipping, scene detection, things like this, you know, where some of that could be accelerated. Have you seen the opportunity to do that inside your digital workflow yet, or are there still complexities in making that happen?
So one of the things, or the big thing we're using AI for at the moment is language-related and text-related things. We're using it for transcription, we're using it to translate things, we're using it to generate, you know, voice from text and text from voice and those kinds of things. As far as editing, we haven't really looked at that yet.
How about the Spanish language content you guys produce? Is there any workflows in there where you've been able to help automate translations or?
Translations have been done a little bit, and that's one of the things that I'm looking at while I'm here at NAB. We were just, actually this morning, the very first meeting I had was to look at a company to help us get a little bit more of that done, a little easier.
Yep.
And so I think that is in our future very shortly.
Got it. Well, I think, you know, we do have a strong point of view in ARC that there's the potential right now to do much more automation than we've done in the past. Definitely along the efficiency play that you're talking about, but maybe also unlocking new types of content. I mean, show of hands from the audience, how many people find that they're stitching together workflows inside their own broadcast operation more than they'd like to? Some hands? Yeah, a few hands. Yeah. So I think it's still a problem that I see among a lot of our broadcast customers, particularly in the digital side of the workflow, you know, where it's changing much more frequently, and those workflows maybe aren't meant to be as permanent over time.
I would agree with that. You know, it's the platform of the day. And, you know, one of the things that we're trying to do is we obviously have the streaming app and other apps, mobile reader app and those kinds of things. But particularly in the streaming world, you know, you have Roku, Android TV, Amazon Fire Stick, you know, Samsung, and you know, when I talk to people who aren't in it every day in our building, you know, our CEO doesn't necessarily deal with it every day. It really is like you need a scorecard to keep up with all that,
Yeah.
and the workflows needed to feed them and stuff. And one of the things, you know, different captioning they need, and all those kinds of things. It is very complicated. And actually, one of the things I saw yesterday was use of AI testing all of those workflows and stuff. And that would be a really good use of AI. I was very excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can like close your eyes and imagine a scenario where going from just AI assisted or other types of automation to fully agentic, you've got a live stream that you're running, you're able to automatically identify the moment, clip it, draft the story automatically, maybe even publish it automatically. How far away do you think you guys are from that type of workflow?
You're not going to like my answer. It depends on the cost.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because you're looking at, how can you do it with humans in a semi-automated workflow today?
Right. Look, I think there's efficiencies to be gained by AI, right? But let's say I'm replacing some editors, how much do they make? How much is it going to cost to, to bring on this software as a service or whatever the AI is? That's one of the questions I have. And the other thing is, fixed cost, not fixed cost.
Yeah.
Our finance team hates unknowns.
Makes sense. I mean, I guess to shift a little bit, thinking about what this looks like from the audience side, one of the complexities for a lot of broadcasters today is it's not quite as simple as just what you're doing on linear and what you're doing on your website, your mobile app, or OTT.
Right.
Actually, we're talking about all kinds of destinations, either the ones that you're operating yourself or the ones where folks are taking your content, your reporting, and then basically creating content around it. And we're seeing this for local broadcasters, Reddit, Nextdoor, Facebook. The conversation's happening there, the audience is there, even though you're doing all the work. And if you want to participate on those channels, it's yet more workflows that your humans have to run.
Right, and then I think one of the things that a lot of people, like I'm out on the show floor and I'm talking to people and stuff, I can't just stop broadcasting either. I'm broadcasting in the public interest, I have a license, I need to keep broadcasting. So I have legacy workflows no matter what that I have to keep in place.
Yeah, it makes sense. You have to balance those with even what's happening with the audience as they kind of move among different channels.
Right.
So let's talk about this just a little bit. So right now you've got local news audiences that are genuinely fragmented, not just streaming, not just linear, all these different destinations. And I think, the example in Miami and South Florida is a good one because you've got a lot of different communities that in some cases might be split across many different platforms. WhatsApp is really popular among Hispanic users and these days among almost everybody. It's yet another community to monitor and try to work inside, and it just adds to the overhead. How much of that audience do you feel like WPLG actually can participate and own versus is simply supplying the reporting to help others drive that community?
Ask me the question again.
I think the question is how many of those platforms you can sort of sustain the curation or the work that just really goes into building those into communities that you participate in, as opposed to those are just communities that are using the content and the reporting that your team does, but ultimately the conversation is just happening there.
I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I do know that we have tried very hard over-the-air broadcasting. Not only is there a divide amongst communities like Hispanic or African American, those kinds of things, but there's also socioeconomic, classes, and a lot of lower income people watch over-the-air television, right? I mean, it makes sense, because a bunch of streaming services can be very expensive, those kinds of things. So we have been reaching out to them a lot to try and make sure they're also an audience, or viewers, users that might struggle with technology, may not have the latest platforms to do things on. So we've been trying to bring them along too and outreach to them to get them involved in viewing us, finding us, making sure they can stream us, make sure they can watch us over the air. I forgot to add one thing too.
Yeah.
When we did the swap and lost the ABC affiliation, at the time we were the ATSC 3.0 lighthouse in the market. And so we had taken that role on because we thought ATSC 3.0 was going to be our future. And so when we were making the decision and talking about it, I have a saying, it's like, I'm not a rear view guy, I want to look through the windshield. if we're all going to ATSC 3.0, and then this is our chance to go to ATSC 3.0, and somebody else can be running the 1.0, then we're going to be the 3.0 guys, because that's where we're going to land 4 years from now, 5 years from now. And so we did a whole swap. We changed RF channels. Our ATSC 1.0 channel moved to a different RF channel. When we lost our affiliation, it had to go back.
Yeah.
And so we ping-ponged viewers back across RF channels. And that impacted a lot of the over-the-air viewers too. So, I mean, we have had, in the last year, a Herculean task. And, you know, one of the things we're actually looking at improving certain apps and certain things we do, but our mantra right now is we do not want to cause any more disruption to our viewers. We don't want to have viewers having to look for us and find us again. We've done that enough to them recently.
Let's talk about the digital side of that then. So you lose ABC as a brand, as the front door for WPLG.
Correct.
So what does kind of rebuilding your own direct audience look like? I mean, presumably some portion of your audience before, you know, related primarily with your brand, not just ABC, but there's some top of funnel that you were getting through that affiliation.
A lot. I think broadcasters have done themselves a huge disservice by letting, you know, MVPDs present your station as, you know, in the program guide with an ABC meatball.
Yep.
So in a lot of ways over time, you're losing your identity. And that did not serve us well. You know, they think you are ABC.
So what did you guys do to make your brand more prominent? I mean, obviously you lost the ABC logo, but...
We lost the ABC logo, and we just a lot of on-air promotion, but we had to do a lot of, you know, radio, billboard, bus benches, all those kinds of things.
Just old school marketing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just old school marketing.
Do you have data that shows that you had some success with that and were able to build a new direct audience, including for digital?
Yes, we actually, as of now, we beat ABC in all but 3 day parts.
Huh. That's what I should have started with in this, right? So that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, so we aren't beating them at 11 a.m., which is The View. Believe it or not, we aren't beating them with General Hospital. I guess General Hospital has a lot of viewers. Who'd have thought? Since soap operas went away, I'm not sure why, since General Hospital does so well. But, and then World News Tonight. And all other times, we beat them. So we have rebuilt our audience, and I think we're off and running. You know, I think we're going to be just fine.
Makes sense. So, you know, back to kind of the digital side, you know, every broadcaster right now is making sort of a structural choice. Are they distributing content everywhere and hoping that algorithms kind of send people back? Or, you know, are you investing in building something that people come directly to your brand? So, you know, beyond kind of what you get through the FCC license through linear.
All right, so the answer is we do both.
Okay. What's that look like?
Well, we put a lot of content on YouTube, and it gets a lot of viewing.
How do you choose what goes on YouTube?
That's a good question. I'm not the guy who chooses that, but it's a lot of our news content. I mean, it's our news stories.
Yeah.
We slice up, you know, our lead stories. The first block of our newscast gets sliced up and put on the Channel 10 channel on YouTube. We do streaming there. We post a lot of our specials. We do a cooking show, a home design show, a SoFlo fitness show called SoFlo Health. All those shows get posted on YouTube. And they get posted on our website, and they get posted, you know, just about everywhere we can put it, and we air it. So, you know, we're everywhere.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And we don't want to hedge our bet, you know what I mean? We just want to go where the viewers are.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and that's something obviously at ARC we help our customers with. We help them distribute to YouTube, to Facebook,
Correct.
to other social destinations as well as their O&O. But at the end of the day, you know, these days we're also focused a lot on making sure those O&O properties are really compelling if you want the users to come there directly. I think you guys are really well set up to do it because you're already in the habit of doing this marketing on your own and building your own brand, which not a lot of broadcasters really are thinking that way because of their affiliate relationships.
100%, I would think that's true. The other thing that I think in a couple of years I'm going to be very thankful, and we our back was against the wall and we stumbled into it. But I think having your own direct-to-consumer streaming app and getting your content to them directly and not relying on a bunch of other people to do it solely, obviously I think you do have to have a mix. But I think in a few years we're going to be very thankful that we had to do that.
Yeah, exactly. To me, that's one of the most exciting things you've done. And honestly, if you look beyond those communities and platforms we talked about before, and you look at what's emerging, between 2020 and 2025, it's not like it's all staying still, right? You see more sources, more types of platforms driving news consumption, especially among younger users. Right. This is true with TikTok is the easiest example to point to there. Social is up overall. But then AI goes from, nothing to actually a major source of news, and especially for young users, virtually overnight.
So let me ask you a question, because I'm not sure I understand. What is AI news?
In this case, I think what most people are referring to is using consumer AI platforms like ChatGPT from OpenAI, like Claude from Anthropic.
I got you.
And they're asking questions about the news. There's, and people have a lot of workflows they're putting together, like prepare a daily digest for me of news. Let me know what's happening in my community. And, it may have grounding for it, it may not, but that's what consumers are doing because they're using it for everything.
Okay.
Point being, overall, I think focusing on your O&O channel makes a ton of sense because we're just going to face more and more competitions across these other channels.
Right.
But there is something, I think, in these channels where consumers are also telling us a story about how they like to interact and what they're looking for. They're looking for interaction, they're looking for personalization, and so they may not actually be looking for it from OpenAI. They might be very happy to get it from WPLG, but they are sort of making a vote about what type of experience they're looking for.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, I think on the way out here. I worry about an algorithm just feeding everybody everything.
Yeah.
Now, look, human beings have been gatekeepers, right? In the newspaper business, the editor's deciding what goes on the front page, all those kinds of things, right? So in a lot of ways, it was an algorithm. It was just that human being, that editor, deciding that. And so there were gatekeepers doing those kinds of things for people. But they could also see like a hurricane brewing and know that, I need to put this on the front page regardless.
It's going to become a big story.
It's going to become a big story. Yeah. And I worry that if it's just an algorithm and all it's doing is, you like stories on golf, and it's just giving you golf stories all the time, you're going to get hit by a hurricane and be like, what the heck just happened?
No, it makes sense. I mean, I think this is a case where the technology is also changing quite a bit, where these days you can look at content that you've been interested in, but we can also look at what other users are interested in.
Right.
We can also look at signals about what's becoming popular quickly.
Right.
So the hurricane might be a great example of that. Obviously ArcXP, we're owned by the Washington Post, so I have some experience too with the editorial inputs that provide their own unique angle and makes media a little bit different than other places. But nonetheless, I think the point overall is, you asked, why are people going to AI? What are they doing there? They're getting very comfortable with these interfaces that obviously have no foot in trying to have an editorial perspective whatsoever.
Right.
Maybe a slightly different angle on this. You've got a loyal, established audience, and we talked about this a little bit. You've got your FCC license, you've got your public mission, and you've got people who've watched Local 10 for years, trust it, turn to it whenever something happens in South Florida. So that relationship is incredibly valuable. It's what the trust in your brand is built upon. And then at the same time, you've got a lot of people, younger users, who are looking to interact with news in a different way. Some of them might also be responding to your brand campaigns and the marketing that you're doing. So you've really got an existing audience, you've got a new audience, one that you could grow. How do you balance these two things? How do you sort of find a way to honor that core audience without forfeiting or designing yourself into irrelevance about the next one?
I think you need to know your market. So what's important in South Florida, and I think you need to deliver content that is relevant to the market. And let's just stay on the hurricane example, right? That would be relevant to the market, obviously, because it's South Florida. And I think as long as you're delivering content that's going to be relevant to the user, no matter what their age is, and look, we have a, Local 10 Fresh, and it talks about the latest restaurant that's out there, and we have Studio 10, and it talks about, the latest movie that's being released and all these kinds of things. So we do a good mix, but we do it with a South Florida bent to it. So you can go to the Miami Film Festival this weekend, and you can go to this new restaurant and stuff. So we make it relevant to a local audience, and I think that's got to kind of be your North Star. You got to work on being relevant to the audience you're serving, your community, and then they'll come.
Makes sense. But I think you're saying it already. You're listening to your users. You're looking at the signals they're providing to you. You're trying to think about how to do reporting, create content that makes sense for them.
Yes.
So I think you're already going a little bit, I'd say, in the direction of trying to...
we certainly look at like what people are engaging with, right? I mean, we look at overnights. Ironically, though, I find Nielsen overnights don't come overnight anymore, which I always found interesting. But we also look at things like ComScore, those kinds of things. So we are tracking users and what they're using and how they're engaging with us. We don't necessarily base every decision just on that, but it's important to pay attention to it for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about the product instead of just the stories that are sitting within it. You snap your fingers. What's one thing that you could build, an experience, a product, a capability that made someone who doesn't currently think of WPLG as their first stop for local news want to pop open the app and engage?
Want to pop open the app? I'll have to think about that a little bit. Give me a second here. I think we want a low bar for entry. We want good first run programming, which is what we're building towards right now. And by September, we're going to have a great lineup, and I think it's really going to get people engaged. I really think it's about the content. One of the things that I would do is so we do a lot of these SoFlo Home, SoFlo Health, those kinds of things. I would make that kind of a standalone. Some of our content, some of our best content, is really kind of hard to find. It's buried in our news website on page 2. I think what I would do is work hard to front that a little better.
You're making the argument for more personalization.
A little bit.
Yeah. I mean, if you follow that through, one idea that we've talked a lot about within ArcXP and with a lot of our broadcast customers is, this idea of who owns that relationship with the audience. And today, if you're relying on a lot of other platforms to drive that content back to you, in the end, that first-party data, the information about what they're looking for...
They own it.
They own it,
yeah.
Right? They don't, and especially in the digital channels, obviously it's completely different in linear. They're tuning into your channel, and the only question you're dealing with there is, is the affiliate sort of getting the brand recognition, or
right.
the parent,
That was a painful lesson, by the way.
But on the digital side, it's very possible for people to visit your channel and have no idea they're interacting with Local 10 at all.
Correct. So what we try to do is brand it. You know what I mean? Everything has a bug on it, so they can see it. By the way, that's as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm thinking about this. If we do a lot of vertical video, what's that branding going to look like?
Right. Exactly.
So.
To me, it's still very much part of the same brand that you have, although people are thinking a lot more about how to expose the individual creators and the personalities about who's creating content, and that format lends itself to that much more. I think the point overall is it still sits in your house, not in somebody else's.
Yeah, and Look, I can't say this enough. You know, it was extremely frustrating on these cable systems and stuff when we moved to independence, you know, and next to our logo was still ABC's logo, and we couldn't break that free, and, you know, people were so confused. And even people in the building, you know, we were giving them these, like, FAQs, you know, so they could answer questions and stuff. I think we took, like, at least 1,000 viewer calls in a week.
Yeah.
We, you know, had teams of people from 8 in the morning till 8 at night just answering questions. And then, of course, one of the things that happens in the Miami market is that was in August. The snowbirds weren't there. And so, you know, the first very cold Northeast week, more phone calls because everybody came down and was like, wait a minute, where are you? What's going on here?
So maybe let's shift gears a little bit. You know, for the linear side, broadcast ratings have been the mainstay of the way to measure success with audience for 70 years. As an engineering organization, what does it mean as it starts to shift? First, obviously the last 10 or 20 years in digital, and then now as people look for more personalized content, as you try to find your way into different and newer audiences, how are you measuring success?
So we spend a lot of time looking at what's the Google. There's a Google product that shows us engagement.
Yep.
We serve how many ads we're serving, how many views they're getting, those kinds of things. We look at that. Another thing we try to do is make sure that, you know, we're putting Scuddy markers on things, we're decorating the feed properly, we're making sure that availability is there for doing programmatic ads and those kinds of things, so we can see, and then we can see how much we're serving. And oh, by the way, one of the great metrics we're getting is just how many bytes people are consuming.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So you have a better idea of like the depth of engagement, and that, especially since you released your own OTT product, you must get other signals out of that you didn't out of.
Yeah, like the bytes that people are consuming, downloads.
Have you learned anything about the content that they prefer versus when it was part of the affiliate, or when, you know, obviously through linear?
I would say that's going to be in the next version of the app, because to be honest with you, right now we were just concerned about keeping things at the level we were before the switch,
Yeah.
and or building back to that level. So our main focus has been on our over-the-air linear feed being streamed and just making sure people can get to that, because if we didn't do that, we would have lost a lot more audience. So that's what we've been doing now. We're gonna release another version of the app that's gonna have, by the way, a much better user experience.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things. So, you know, we're trying to go to version 2, get more engagement, get them a local TV app that is more like Netflix and other, you know, big-time streaming apps that they're used to. Features like DVR and program guide, you know, rewind, all those kinds of things. And so we are trying to, you know, build the audience.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, you know, one thing that we work on with our customers at ArcXP, obviously, is you know, in building that type of engaging OTT experience, you do need personalization in there, and you need the signals about what it is that people prefer and how they're engaging.
Right.
And so, you know, building that first-party profile, gathering the data about how people are working, using a two towers model to create the right type of personalization, you know, is easy, even if you're working as an independent station.
Right.
You know, to build an app like that all on your own.
Yeah, another thing that we're having to deal with is just rights management. You know, it's a lot of our content that we can put out there because we own it. But we have syndicated content too, and we have to be very careful how we use that because we only have limited rights on how to distribute that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, let's go to a few quick questions to finish this up. So, first one infrastructure or workflow bet that you're fully committed to right now, no going back.
What workflow I'm committed to?
well, a change that you're making. So one big change about workflow, infrastructure.
I got to be able to get content in from the field faster. And I'm going to find whatever I can to do that.
And what does that mean, bring it in faster?
So, you're out in the field, you shoot a story.
Yeah.
I need it back at the station as quick as I can get it back. So, slow data feeds don't make sense. Feeds that aren't self-healing, that can't, if they drop, can't continue, automatically pick up and get fed in because, on a deadline. And we're doing it on a much larger scale. We have to feed a much larger beast. So we need that content in quickly. So that's a workflow that I'm committed to. There's no going back.
And what are you looking to change, how are you going to solve that problem?
We're going to solve that problem by using the cloud as a waypoint as it comes into the building. So and we've pretty much solved it. We just need to evolve it now. That's one of the things we're doing. Streaming our content, having our own app and streaming there's no going back. I think it's been great for us and great for our viewers. People call up, they have a problem, they have this, they can't receive you, they can't do that. Download the app, you can do this. We want to get on as many platforms as we can. I've talked a lot about the CTV app. One of the things we're going to do is we're still going to do a geofenced app, but we're going to move beyond just large screens. We're going to move to tablets and phones. Again, how am I getting to my audience and how am I adjusting, right? Younger people are probably watching a lot more on their phone.
That's right.
So that's one of the things we're doing.
What about the other way around? If there's one thing you could stop doing tomorrow, what would that be?
Cybersecurity. I'm not going to be able to stop doing it, by the way. I'm not even saying that I would. But you talk about a time bandit and resource bandit is dealing, you're putting in all these IP-based workflows and they help you, but it's also an attack vector. And having to constantly evolve and protect that, boy, if I didn't have to do that, I could, I'm driving down the road at 60 miles an hour, I could be going 160.
Yeah, that's right. How about, we talked about how the workflow changes right now with AI, and I think your answer was a little bit in between, right? There's efficiency changes that you can make today, but there's also things you need to preserve about the current content and workflow that you're producing.
Right.
What about fast forward 5 years, and you see the pace of change that's happening even in the past 2? How do you think AI is going to change local news and local broadcast?
I think it's going to make us more efficient. I mean, one of the things I was looking at today is there's a weather provider out there that they're going to do, AI-assisted storytelling. So it's going to allow journalists or meteorologists to work faster because they have, I don't know how much you know about weather systems and stuff, but they may have 200 scenes that they've built over time, and there's something about a drought that they built a year ago they don't remember is there, and all this kind of stuff. Well, if you can have AI kind of cataloging what you have and stuff, you don't have to rebuild it. You can go, oh yeah, this is back here, let me go get it, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of,
What about for the audience in real time, an example like that? Like, do you think that there's stories that you've done before, video that you have, that if you didn't have to sort of manually pull it out, but if the audience could access it directly?
So here's another thing that you could do that we're seriously considering is do weather forecasts in multiple languages.
Yeah. By the way, I mean, these examples, that example that you just gave, the one that I just gave, we can do today, and that's actually, I don't think that's AI in 5 years. I think those are unlocks for local
100%.
broadcasters.
No, 100%. I think there are things, look, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, we're a TV station, we're journalists, purely AI-created content, you have to be very careful with. It could go to undermining, your integrity and those kinds of things. So you have to do it right, and you have to do it for the right reasons. And I think technically they're available. Are we comfortable doing them? Do we have buy-in? within the organization. We're
Yeah.
working on that.
Yeah. But I mean, I do think back to the audience mission and the folks that you're serving. You guys are a mainstay in your community in South Florida. You probably have more stories, more video than anybody else there about what's happening in those communities. So, I do think rather than being sort of afraid of these types of applications of AI, I think there's like a strong use case for serving that mission through that. And the type of archive you have is just an excellent example of nobody else will have that.
First of all, you're preaching to the choir. I'm an evangelist for that. But, it is a lot of work. A lot of that archive is not in a digital format. And so you would have to retrieve that and, get that out there. And that would be a Herculean task.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely something that we're trying to help our customers and broadcast with at ArcXP. And, even as we speak, there's a number of customers we're working with on AI-enabled workflows internally, but also consumer-facing. And I do think that's part of how we start building more compelling consumer products that
Right.
ultimately drive people directly to these brands and not, through platforms overall.
Right.
Last question for you, Darren, before you finish it up. So what do you think the platform that powers the next generation of local broadcast, what does that platform actually need to do? And what is it that it can't do today? If you built a whole platform for this from scratch, for running your digital business, what is it that thing needs to do?
I think it needs to be very resilient, self-healing. It would be nice to say, I want this, but I want it on this platform, that platform, that platform, and it would create those iterations for me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of build once and deploy many.
Yep.
Because we spend a lot of time, and we're just learning this, but we spend a lot of time getting things together to deploy across all these different platforms. And simplifying that or automating that process, I think, at least from my perspective, would go a very long way.
Awesome. Good answer. Well, I don't think that's too far in the future. That's some of the stuff we're building right now. We're really proud to partner with you guys on that work, as well as many other broadcasters. Darren Alline, thank you so much for joining me today. Excellent to learn about what's going on there. And obviously, a ton of congratulations to what you guys have done over the past year that I think very few broadcasters, even at a conference as big as this, could claim to have done.
Well, thank you, Matt. It was a pleasure being here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.